when you're working with the larger end of those numbers, do you find it possible to be responsive to individual students' learning needs?
Well, it becomes increasingly difficult, particularly if you're teaching for 1 hour slots. But I tend to find it's very possible outside of those 1 hour slots, so I tend to offer a reasonable amount of tutorial support, some of which could be in the lab, the teaching lab, or some of which could be in my office. And that tends to meet those sorts of needs.
But actually in the lecture itself, do you tend to regard that as providing information, or are there interactive parts that you aim to bring in as well?
Well, my strategy for dealing with that is by delivering content which is varied, enables for a whole range of different prior knowledge that students bring to the subject. So rather than just...
Oh, that's interesting. How do you the idea of the prior knowledge that they bring, as it were, how do you mine that? How do you get at that, especially in a lecture context?
Well, I'm thinking more in terms of seminars for that. So I would assume, for example, that some of my students have got some prior knowledge of the use of technology, for example, whilst others won't have any. And I'll assume that some of the students will have prior knowledge, say, of thinking about a form in the context of Western classical music, whereas others probably won't at all. And some of them will have knowledge of, I don't know, popular electronic music, but perhaps not the sort of electronic music that I'm teaching. So what I would aim to do in a teaching session is draw from all of those areas and try and provide extra information for people that have a small amount of knowledge in that, validate knowledge that's already held by some people within a certain area, but also provide something for people that haven't ever touched on these subject areas before. And I try to reinforce that with relevant listening and reading materials, so that people don't feel like they're entering into a world of the unknown, but they have perhaps some indication of this being relevant to the subject area, and then they can go off and read all of these extra materials.